Hello there, and a very warm welcome to night 2 of Forge TV's coverage of the 2022 Sheffield Students' Union Officer Election Debate. My name is Matthew Barnes.
And I'm Josh Bailey.
And we'll be presenting the coverage for you this evening. Coming up tonight, we have the debates for the roles of SU President, Activities and Development Officer, Education Officer, and Liberation Officer, and they are all coming up for you tonight here on Forge TV.
The voting opens on Monday at 10 a.m, and the voting then closes on Wednesday at 5 p.m.
The results will be announced on the evening of Thursday the 10th of March, and you can keep right up to date with all the very latest developments right across Forge Media. So this brings us on nicely to the first of tonight's debates, which is for the role of Education Officer. So the main purposes and responsibilities of the Education Officer include representing and promoting the views and interests of students to create change on all relevant educational issues. So this includes representing students on educational and teaching quality issues in the university, both locally and nationally.
They also need to develop and support an effective structure of academic representation. This means they oversee the recruitment, training and work of student academic representatives.
Also included in this role is the responsibility to lead on campaigns of all relevant educational issues, and this includes overseeing the development of higher educational issues nationally and ensuring a coordinated response from Sheffield Students' Union.
They also need to be a member and support the Education Committee, as well as working with the Postgraduate Office to support all postgraduate students. But as you can see, it's nearly time for the Educations debate then, so settle yourself down, get a snack of your choice, and enjoy the whole host of debates we've got lined up for you here on Forge TV.
Good evening, I'm Sam Eyre and I'm your host for this evening. And this is the debate for the Education Officer, and these are the candidates.
Hi, I'm Ben.
Hi, I'm Alison.
I'm Leo.
I'm Joe.
I'm Kavya.
Hi, I'm Rhiannon.
So those are the candidates, and here is the first question. If remote learning opportunities were incorporated next year due to COVID-19 concerns, what would you do to ensure that remote learning students have access to the same opportunities and resources that in-person students would have as well?
Okay. Sorry if I pause in between, I'm going to be really nervous, but first and foremost, what I would like to ensure if I got this role is make digital learning accessible to everyone. Everyone should have the option to access it from anywhere in the world. Everyone should be able to, just access all of our online services. I was aware that last year or something, some students from China were not able to access Blackboard, and then the Students' Union had to come up with an alternative to come up with a VPN service. So I just want to make sure that those things are already checked way in advance, and this isn't like a last moment issue that comes up. And I want everyone to have the option of distance learning so they don't have to take a leave of absence. Shona just some time ago told me her story, and it was really disheartening to hear that she didn't get the option with her disability, so she had to, take a leave of absence. I want to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone. I want to ensure uniformity across all departments, because currently some departments are doing something, some are doing something else, some are being really strict, some are not. I want all departments to have one uniform policy and a standard procedure for everything. And I want better labs to be online, because let's be honest, for science courses, having dissections online and just, like a basic protocol is not worth the tuition fee that we're paying. I want better labs. I want it to be so good that you almost don't realize it's online. And no more recycled lectures. We want lectures that are like live on Collaborate. I want more one-to-one sessions. And sorry. I want more one-to-one meetings with tutors as well, and just an easier application for ECFs, because there's a lot that can go on when you're learning online and you're distancing at home.
Just passing on to the next, please.
We need to hire more staff. Casualisation is a massive problem. With remote learning, piggybacking on in-person learning means that there just aren't available the the dedicated resources and online spaces for people who are solely online. Therefore, we need more staff and the existing staff to have better paying conditions, because otherwise they just simply don't have the time or energy to dedicate to the remote learning students. Like, we're paying 9k a year, like international students more. The university has a surplus of £52 million. Like, the money is there, and we need to have that student experience protected. Just especially one of the main reasons why remote learning is such a big thing has been obviously the last year with COVID. If that becomes a problem again, what the university needs to not do is what they did last time, which was lying to students, bringing them into hungs, charging extortionate rents. Like, I was the first year and I was massively disillusioned to see just how we were brought in and lied to. That was when me and some other people started to rent strike. In the course of that, over 100 students withheld hundreds of thousands of pounds from the university. We took part in a 2-week occupation of the Arts Tower, resulting in the university eventually giving students back hundreds of thousands of pounds. That's the kind of direct action the Students' Union needs to be leading on to fight for remote learning, people doing remote learning to have, the quality of education they're paying dearly for. Thanks.
I think it's a great opportunity to reach out to students who have already been through this and actually see what was lacking the first time round and see what they would want. And I think reaching out to other universities, institutions, where we can provide more resources online and giving access to students. And I would really like to reach out to students who have really heavy practical-based modules, because I don't think being remote, you can have the same quality as being in person. So I'd love to reach out and see where they feel and what they feel would be best implemented into those.
Thank you very much. In my case, I believe leaving no voices behind. As long as we leave we leave voices behind, we are not going to have an equal and inclusive learning environment. And I believe transitioning to in-person learning has been so rapid that we started leaving voices behind. So I think things like your illness, your disability, your remoteness for any reason, including you being an international student and not being able to move, or you being a carer, you have responsibilities within a certain household. These should not be keeping you away from your education, which is your right and which is subject to your payment, your consumer right as well. So I believe we should have all lectures recorded, no exceptions whatsoever. All of the university facilities should have the necessary equipment, high quality as well. And I'm aware most of the lectures recorded at the moment are only recorded audio. I think video equipment should also be provided, because certain accessibility needs require video and being able to see what's going on, as well as being able to hear. And I also think if a person, for whatever need, requires to learn remotely, I believe those remote opportunities should be available, like online specific seminar groups or closed circle, whatever closed circle groups they require, they should be available online as well. And yes, no one should be left behind.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Joe and Leo here. Last year, when everything went remote access, the university decided that it could be the voice for students, telling us that learning was the same as in person, when that wasn't necessarily always the case for everyone. So I want to have agency for students by opening up communication forums for people who are learning remotely, so they can tell us what their experience is like, what's happening, and where we need to hold the uni to account for this. I would also lobby for online assessment choices. The one good thing that did come from the pandemic was the reduction in the attainment gap, and we need to strengthen those kind of moves by having student choice, so that's really important. And then finally, to lobby for more grants and bursaries for remote learning, so that if a student is at home, they can replicate their learning environment so it's more equal, whether that's buying a desk or buying equipment, because that's not the case for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, so we really need an education that's focused on transparency, inclusivity and well-being. First and foremost, I'll have open meetings with all affected students so they can express their issues and their interests with remote learning, and we can have a student-informed policy from the outset. I also want to move away from the binary between face-to-face and online and really focus on blended or hybrid learning, and again have compulsory online lectures, online seminars for arts, because there's minimal face-to-face contact hours. You miss a seminar for remote reasons, well-being reasons, you're missing a vital part of your education. So seminars really need to move towards an online accessibility. And finally, sufficient well-being and IT support across the board, not just remote access, so that students can always feel that the SU is looking out for them and will represent their voices.
Thank you. So next up we've got another question, and it is: concerns such as strikes and the proposed changes to various academic departments are prevalent right now. What are your plans should these issues continue into the next academic year?
I think with strikes, it's frustrating for both staff and students because, I mean, the strikes are really needed. We need our lecturers for amazing quality teaching that we get here. So I think Savannah's done a really great job at supporting both students who are on both sides of the strike, and I'd like to continue doing that and having open conversations with how as education officer, I can best support both sides as well, and having conversations where it can work with if lectures are closed. And I think working with other officers such as the International Community Officer would be amazing, because international students don't have the same opportunities to join the strike that just regular home students do. So I think that's something that needs to be discussed in regards to the closures of departments and the changes being made. I think putting maybe panel discussions on and rallies throughout the year would be really fantastic, because this is all an effect of like the marketisation of universities, and we need to remember that they are meant to be centres for knowledge and research, and I think holding the university accountable and getting more student voices heard about how these changes are affecting them and maybe swaying them to look at other universities is really important.
Thank you very much. I think there are two ways of approaching this. One thing, yes, there is the constant concern of marketization of education and how that affects the quality of education and the situations and circumstances where staff members are working on. And I think these should be addressed as lobbying for a lot better working conditions for the staff and a lot cheaper education for students as well, and specifically for international students as well. And on the other hand, while we are working towards this overarching goal of being able to resolve the marketization of education, we also have to address the immediate concerns of the students, like especially when it comes to strikes. A lot of students, especially international students and disabled students, are disproportionately affected by these events. And I think as your education officer, I should be able to listen to you and engage with you and try, again, leave no voices behind while considering these issues. Thank you.
As an archaeology student, I understand the pain and uncertainty facing lots of students and especially staff with like the closure of the archaeology department and like similar things like the restructuring for school and languages and culture, which is like facing massive cuts. So in the context of this, I think that the best way to solve these strikes is to have a strong students' union to support the UCU, to create a really strong fight, to get the dispute over as quickly as possible with minimal disruption and have the best resolution for staff and students alike. The Students' Union needs people who understand how strikes work, and I believe I have experience in that. I was central to the rent strike of last year. As part of the Sheffield Solidarity Society, I've helped with some other activists. I've helped support the longest gig economy strike in the UK history, which, if you don't know, is the ongoing Just Eat strike, where they've been on strike for 69 days now. I think, and you know, without trying to put too fine a point in it, I think there's only one candidate here on the stage who took part in some solidarity occupations in support of the UCU and decked basically every building on campus with a massive banner. I think we need a fighting students' union with people who have proven they can take on management and win before, and we can do it again.
So I'm very much for the strikes. I believe that they force the university to face certain issues. But the main thing that I deal with in terms of these strikes is to minimize the negative effects of these strikes. And a way I do it is plan out the timetable way in advance. There's like no last moment changes that students have to face, because sometimes they can put certain students under a tremendous amount of pressure and anxiety because of last moment changes. So I'd like these to be planned out way in advance, for which I would coordinate really well with the academic reps, with student staff committees, and just, you know, arrange a lot of forums to hear your opinions on it, to get more in touch with you and update you properly over this. I would also try and provide compensations wherever possible. And if libraries are shut, I would try to make cafes open. I would try to open up some lecture halls for, you know, study sessions wherein people could go and study, because libraries are really important, and that's one way I would approach this. Thank you so much.
So yeah, I have full solidarity with the strikes. I've worked with the Labour Society. We've been talking to UCU about how students can really effectively pressure the university by not beyond participating. You know, we can encourage bad reviews, and the university will really respond to that. But fundamentally, the Students' Union has a responsibility to represent all student views on strikes, whether it's pro or against strikes. So with situations of occupations, we really need to make sure that students are well informed about when they're happening, where they're happening, and there needs to be accessibility across the university to compensate students who are displaced by occupations. So within the SU, in other free buildings, really make it that students can engage despite disruptions. Yeah, and I wouldn't just refer students to department heads. I'd make sure that they have full contact with me as an education officer and full contact with other students, people protesting, all views on the strikes. And fundamentally, transparency is key on strike issues.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that as well. I do think there needs to be a two-pronged approach to things, not in a divisive way, but in a solidarity way. So, like, to have action, first of all. I think it's really important to pressure the uni, and I get really annoyed when the SU is used as a marketing tool by the uni because it's the top SU in the country and all this amazing stuff. That's not because of the university, that's because of the SU, and it uses the SU as a selling point to sell to prospective students, like today. And so I think a really effective strategy is on open days to disallow like campus tours to come in here, and that can really affect the university. I also want to collaborate with SUs nationally to fight for more public funding of higher education, because that is what is needed. It's been declining year on year, which is not good. And also, secondly, to support students immediately, like Leo said, I really want to facilitate more collective complaints. Often students are disempowered by thinking that if they complain, they're just an individual. But if complaints happen on an SU basis, as a group, there's more empowerment. And also seek out strike funds. Staff aren't paid when on strike, so where are these funds going? We need to make sure these funds go back into student services.
Thank you. And the next question that we have is, many of your manifestos aim to make courses and curriculums more inclusive, something of which that many of your predecessors has also tried to do. So what steps will you all take to make sure that your ideas are implemented?
Can someone else go? Can I
sorry, yeah.
Well, frankly, I'm not scared of taking on the university leaders over this. You know, I'm going to hold them to account. I'm going to make sure that any policy promises they make are followed through, and if they're not, we're calling them out on it. We want open meetings between students and leaders to ensure transparency and accountability. And, you know, we can do that through enhancing the student network and showing the university that actually our students' union has a strong, proud, and loud voice, and we are powerful, and we can change education for the better.
Mean to you there, sorry. Um, yeah, so first of all, there's sort of national scale and Sheffield scale to this. Recently, the government announced considerations of a minimum grade requirement to get into university, to get a student loan to get into university, which only benefits the richest of students and disallows anyone else or even coming to university. And so that really needs to be fought on a national scale, first of all. Also, on a Sheffield scale, to reduce the hoops for extenuating circumstances, it's different across different departments and it's made really tricky when it shouldn't be. Education is really important and it shouldn't be this competitive thing which is made really hard to access even when you're there. And finally, to encourage more like interdisciplinary events, because that's also really more inclusive. So like today, when strikes are happening and things like that, there were teach outs, so people could come here and still learn about loads of different topics. So it was really this important educational environment and it wasn't just this stressful time of being at university. Yeah.
Something that I'd really love to do is set up working groups in departments that are formed of both staff and students, and they can come together and sit down and be like, actually, I think our curriculum could do with more case studies, more seminars on discussions around decolonising the curriculum and raising marginalised voices. I would also like to implement more academic rep training with a specific area in decolonising the curriculum, so that this can be brought into SSLC meetings and hold lecturers accountable if they said they're going to make changes. These minutes gets released and students can be like, you've said you're going to do this, are you doing it? And also, again, I like my idea of panel conferences where it holds the university accountable. Students can come ask officers, university members, what they are doing to actually make these changes in the university, and again, hold them accountable.
Thank you. So one thing I've noticed that particularly international students suffer with is bridging the gap, because internationally education can be so different from how it is over here. And I want to be able to provide more support for this. I want there to be more peer review stuff, more peer support, so people can just understand how exactly stuff needs to be here. There needs to be more past sessions. They're not just supposed to be for first years, it should be for all the years, so people can really understand what's going. We need to have more formative assessments, we need to have more stuff, and understand how much international students can lack because of the bridge and the gap. And I just want to increase the awareness of counselor meetings so students can know entirely what's going on at the university and how they can represent themselves and their issues. Also, I would like to set up a committee for carers and for women with families, because I've noticed that something like that doesn't really exist, and I'd really like to have something like that to help such women. And I'd like to have more student forums and get to know more from people about their personal issues and work more on decolonizing the curriculum, obviously. And yeah, thank you.
The single best way to make the curriculum inclusive is for the university and the Students' Union to not comply with the racist monitoring policy PREVENT. Muslim students are more than 40 times more likely to be referred, and that's just a tip off of the iceberg. It's often used as a way to suppress political opinions, because marginalised students are afraid of that they could make an innocuous comment and they could be kicked off a uni course or just simply intimidated into being less politically engaged. It's a tool of a racist authoritarian government. It has no place in education. People talk about free speech at universities. This is what free speech at universities look like. It is not letting these oppressive, allegedly anti-extremist, but really just authoritarian tongues in our curriculum. and we need a strong fighting students' union, like I keep saying, to campaign and have student action to force the university to not comply.
Thank you very much. Well, as a multi-ethnic international student, I can talk about inclusive curriculum forever and ever. But to summarize what I think cannot be summarized, one thing it's important to ask students on each and every single points. And I have been a part of student inclusions committees, which has been a success of Savannah Hanson, the current education officer. A tribute to her, great job. And this has been a topic of discussion in student inclusions committees as well. Two ways to approach this again, leaving no voices behind. One thing is about the nature of the curriculum, how the curriculum is designed. Is it only Western sources? Does it involve other sources as well? And the other thing is the material formats. When we say inclusion, we also should include the disabled student as well. So I think the material format of audio, video when required is also a way to approach inclusive curriculum as well. That's the flip side. So yes, leaving no voices behind. Thank you.
So those were the questions put to the education officers. Now, unfortunately, we did have a few absentees that you may have noticed. Rhiannon Davis will have joined us via videotape, but unfortunately, Paul Adams and Chen Xin Wan were unavailable for this evening's debates. But that was it. Thank you very much for watching.
So that was the book closed on the education's debate, and now we move on to the next chapter of the liberations debate, and the roles and responsibilities are as followed. They represent and promote the views and interests of students from the liberations groups and those who face systemic barriers at university to ensure a coordinate and collective approach.
The Liberation Officer is also responsible for leading campaigns against all forms of discrimination. So this includes organising and coordinating activities which challenge discrimination and prejudice of all kinds. And it also includes organising campaigns on institutional discrimination, harassment, safety and equality.
They also need to develop and support programs designed to tackle current issues affecting students from liberations groups and those facing systemic barriers across university.
The Liberation Officer is also responsible for supporting, coordinating and collaborating with the liberation work of a number of different students' committees. These include the Black and Minority Ethnic Students Committee, the Disabled Students Committee, the Women's Students Committee and the LGBT+ Students Committee. So they are the main roles and responsibilities of the Liberation Officer. I believe we are all ready for our next debate this evening, so we will once again hand over to our host, Sam.
Good evening and welcome to the Liberation Officer debate. Now, we do have a few absentees, and those are Malachi Brandon, who will be joining us via videotape, but we've also got Rachel Griffiths and Harry Maddox, who are unavailable. But here are the candidates.
Hello, I'm Grace Cleary.
Hello, I'm Ruben Paul.
Hi, I'm Rob Payne.
Hi, I'm Liu Liu.
Hi, and I'm Abigail Kirk.
So those are the candidates, and now on with the first question. Liberation Officer is a fairly new full-time officer position. Why do you think having one is important for students?
Yeah, this week I try to introduce Liberation Officer to my friends and the students around me, but lots of people just ask me, what is for? Yeah, that's very interesting question. For me, it's the same. When I think about Liberation Officer, I think the most important thing is to promote our unity, is understanding, and for freedom. And also, I think every person is every student is respect to each other. Like me, sometimes I'm an international student and also a mature student, a woman. Sometimes I feel out of group. So I try to make myself connect with each other. But at the beginning, it's very difficult. Then I found if my the people around me, they try to understand me and support me, I feel more confident and feel more freedom of my mind in the uni. So for my role, I will try to be a friend, stand together with all of you, and try to promote, understand you and support you. That's my point. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was on council last year and it came to a vote for us on council. So I was one of the people that was like really for liberation, because obviously it replaced the women's role in some sort, because obviously women's has gone to part-time officer now. So we felt that although women's officer was a key role, we needed more. Why did we not have a liberation officer that supported all these other groups, that referred to intersectionality? I mean, I'm a woman, I'm part of the LGBT community, so then there's two roles there that weren't represented. So it's important to have a liberation officer because it brings together all them intersectionalities, all them different student groups that weren't heard in the SU, weren't heard in the university, and it brings people in liberation groups from here up to here with everyone else on that level. So yeah, for me that's why it's really important, and I'm really proud that I was part of the group that brought it to the SU.
I think it's important for marginalised people to see themselves in top roles and positions at the university, especially for all marginalised groups, liberation groups, BME, LGBT+, disabled students, women's. We need to make sure that our voices are being heard. So like the whole point of my campaign is consulting, collaborating and then changing. So making sure that we have those voices at top positions that are able to represent and speak on behalf of students that don't have the time in their busy schedule, and also for students to have somewhere where they can come and vent their issues and actually be heard and seen and understood.
I think it's so important to have someone that's willing to stand up to the uni and challenge them for difficult conversations that can be uncomfortable, you know, on behalf of students that they represent, and someone that they can identify with is so important. From a personal point of view, it's just so validating to know that the Students' Union is actively working to represent us and make change that's student-led. You know, we're the ones that get to decide what's right for our groups. So yeah.
So I firmly believe that liberation can only be effectively fought for if we are collaborating with each other, if we're in solidarity with each other. Solidarity between the various marginalised communities on campus and the liberation groups. The liberation groups are well represented on campus by the part-time officers, but that's exactly what they are, they're part-time. It's 8 hours a week, it's barely enough time to advocate for their own communities, let alone collaborate with the other part-time officers. So having this umbrella role, this full-time role that has the time and the power to collaborate between the various part-time officers, to reach out to the other committees, is what we need on campus. It's what we need to fight for our solidarity and our liberation.
Apologies for using notes, I have got a memory problem. It is vital for students to have an easily identifiable officer who cover all aspects of liberation. Yes, there's brilliant part-time officers and full-time officers, as well as committees who represent students. But unfortunately, there's students who don't realise the committee exists, or in worst case scenario, they feel excluded from not only the committees, but the communities the committees represent. There are several other issues which are barriers for students which are not represented by other liberation groups. For example, I believe class is a prime example which intersects across all of the liberation groups, but is not specifically covered by any university or student union policy. Mental health and neurodiverse conditions are other liberation issues, but not all people may self-define as being disabled if they have these conditions, so they may not reach out to the Disabled Student Committee. Thank you.
So the next question that we have for you all is, what specific kind of activities and campaigns do you have in mind that will combat discrimination or prejudice at Sheffield?
So we don't have a lot of time to go into all of our policies tonight. And I've touched on collaboration before, and I will do again in the next question.
So I'm going to focus on some specific ones that are close to my heart. I'm not going to be a well-meaning white voice on campus right now saying how I'm going to fight racism, because I'm not an authority on that, so I'm going to focus on something else, which is a gender-affirming fund for students here that are trans or gender diverse. Gender-affirming healthcare in this country is, to be blunt, diabolical. It takes years. Some people wait over half a decade to get the surgery they need. And there are items in place that can help alleviate dysphoria, but they are expensive. I'm wearing a binder right now, and it was over £30, and I had to ship it from America. I was lucky enough to be in a financial position where that wasn't something that was going to be a barrier, but I know that many students on campus, it would be. And my quality of life and the quality of life of other trans students is incredibly important, and I know that for the last few months, my life would have been far, far more difficult, and I would not have been as good a student, and I wouldn't have been on committee, and I wouldn't have been advocating for various groups on this campus if I hadn't been able to access those.
So I really want to start a destigmatisation campaign for mental health. I know a lot of students that feel that if they admitted to themselves or others that they were struggling with their mental health on top of everything else that they've probably got going on, that they would be seen as less in the classroom and by their peers. On top of that, I also want to start an anti-racist Decolonise Your Mind campaign, which will hopefully help students and lecturers to start viewing the university through an anti-racist lens and make sure that we're all working together to aid and abet black and minority ethnic groups within the university. And other campaigns I want to look at getting into play.
My primary campaign would be about working towards a truly accessible and inclusive university and Sheffield, not just by physical accessibility, which I know there's many problems at Sheffield University and within the wider city, but a truly accessible one for everyone, regardless of gender, sexuality, age, race, culture, class, or any other discriminatory factor. Until I talk to students more, I talk to student groups, I wouldn't be able to promise what campaigns I'd organise, because I want the campaigns I'd run to be supported by the students who would be campaigning for. I don't want to tell people what they're campaigning for. I want them to tell me. If I was in the role, I'd want them to tell me, and then because I'd be in a position to do that, I would act on their behalf. Once student voices are heard within the university, then I'd like to work with Hallam University to make the voices of Sheffield students across the city heard. And that's probably the only campaign thing what I would like to promise.
In terms of direct action that I want to take to combat discrimination and prejudice, I think the biggest one is the stigma of laziness for students who can't attend lectures sometimes, either medical appointments, mental health issues, sometimes even medication you're taking can make it really difficult to concentrate or pay attention or even remember what it is you've learned, so you want to watch it back. And I've been told by departments, well, just go to the lecture. It doesn't always work like that. You can't tell me that the lecturer is a dinosaur, so you won't record or put the notes online, And I want a campaign to challenge departments to actively put resources online and encourage students to talk to their departments and not make a blacklist, but challenge them if they won't, and offer education and training for potentially ableist views that, everyone can attend a lecture, because they can't always. I also, with spiking, liberation groups are at risk, particularly women, but, everyone. And whether you're physically at risk or, you're just thinking about it, more needs to be done. And the university's done really good work, but we need to continue with that even when cases drop, because they will drop. We're working hard, they will drop. But we also need to start on prevention as well, and education, and talk about consent.
Yeah, for me, I think we can organize more events, let students discuss some topics they are not familiar with. Like when I join some events, raise money for HIV group, then we try to introduce more information about HIV for public. Then people can understand more about this group. then they will try to support this group. And also, if we're familiar with more things we don't know, then we can more understand them. Like we have LGBT months. We can also organize a religion month. Then we can discuss different religion history. That is more interesting. And also last year, one of my friends, she come from Korean, then she's not familiar with LGBT. Then sometimes when we discuss this topic, we feel discriminated by others. So she tried to learn more about it. When I take part in work the dragon show, I really quite enjoy it. So I try to take part in more events. And also, we can promote more space for like women. When I go to gym, sometimes I feel nervous because maybe I'm a woman and I'm quite short girl. When I get together with lots of powerful men, I feel nervous. But in the gym, they have provided us actual 1 hour on Sunday. I really like it. So Sunday, I really go to there, just do exercise with women. I feel comfortable. So I think, okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's been shared that there's so much to try and pack into this question. But one of my main manifesto points is make the university accessible for all. So obviously accessibility sort of relates to disability, but also I'm thinking in the lens of LGBT people, people who feel left out of certain things. So club nights are not accessible for disabled people. Yes, you'll have an accessibility ramp to get down there, but it's overwhelming. You get there and you might not be able to sit down, there's certain rules in place. We have an LGBT night, Grapefruit, but it's once every month, not even that. Why can't we have more? So I'm looking at putting more events in for people from liberation groups. And then in addition to that, I would want to really decolonise the curriculum. Yes, it's been said before, but it's partly achieved, but we need to go further. Our university is sort of grounded on these views that are not inclusive of everyone. So I really want to get behind truly decolonising the curriculum. It's not just a manifesto point that's in there as a buzzword. It's my promise that I want to do it. I'm running on the manifesto point that's realistic and achievable. Everything I've put in there, I believe I can truly bring to this university. Thank you.
So, on to our third and final question for our candidates. How will you coordinate with other part-time committees such as Women's, BAME, Mature Students, etc. to ensure that student concerns are equally represented and heard?
Yeah, I think one person is less powerful. So first, I think we will make all of us should be a group. We work together. So we listen to each other because everyone have different experience and have fantastic ideas. I appreciate to listen to their ideas and their plan. Then we discuss some good thing for all of students. Then. We will work together to make our plan to real result, benefit for all of students. That's what I think.
Yeah, obviously collaboration is the biggest part, and I'd want to encourage weekly meetings with each part-time officer all in a group, so we can communicate together and work together on projects for marginalised groups, because we've got a lot in common. But also encourage one-to-one meetings with each officer on their own, so they feel like they have the space to come and talk to you. As well as, I'm very aware that I don't represent BAME and mature students, so I would put even more effort into dealing with those part-time officers and collaborating in a way that they feel the university is going in the direction that they want it to, because their lived experiences and the lived experiences of the students that come to them are vital in this.
Thank you. I know I said it before, but the Liberation Officer is a full-time role. So whichever one of us gets the role, it's on us to be proactive. It's on us to reach out to the various part-time officers and also chair people of the committees and ask, what do you need? What can we do? What resources can I provide you with? So I would say meeting with the chairs of various committees at least twice a term, find out what their plans are with their events, how can we collaborate, how can I get you in contact with this particular representative or this particular representative. But I think it's also important to recognise that even the part-time officers, even the the various chairpersons and the members of committees, they're individuals. And these liberation groups, we're not monoliths, you know. I don't know what it is to be a trans woman. I don't know what it is to be a cis gay man. We need to collaborate, we need to talk, and we need to reach out to members far more than we do currently to collaborate with each other.
It might not appear so from the way I talk at the moment, but I'm just so nervous. But good communication and collaboration is what my campaign is about, especially if I end up being elected. I'm not currently a huge social media user, but I understand the importance and relevance of it in today's society. And I'm sure the SU have people to help with that if I was elected again, or whoever else is elected, to support them through that. But of course, it's not just social media. I would also welcome any other form of digital communication, and I perform a lot better in one-to-one situations. So obviously that's always welcome. I encourage students, student officers, committees, anybody to come and talk to me whenever they had time. I would like to meet the committees every week to make sure that I'm doing what they want doing. I work for the students and the committees who represent them. Of course, the committee peoples are volunteers, and the part-time officers are also, like it says, part-time. The final students are what may miss out because they still don't engage with the student union. I'd have to find creative ways of reaching them, maybe through working with the university.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm stealing everyone's ideas now, but I'm not, I promise. So yeah, I would work with part-time officers, obviously, want to meet with them as much as I could. Obviously with committees again, societies, and not even just speaking to the chairperson, speaking to everyone in that committee. I would like to have sort of a system where they nominate someone from that committee or society to come to these, like, sort of like a once a month AGM, where we'd get together and discuss everything that needs sorting, what went well, etc. And then I also want to work, it's in my manifesto, working with key decision makers in the city and the university to take RSU further and bigger. And with key decision makers, I'm talking about sort of tackling spiking within the city, making the city safer for liberation groups. So I'd do that, and I'd also bring together students as well, because it's not just this one voice is Liberation Office speaking for all the liberation groups and people. So yeah, that would be the way that I would do it.
Yeah, so I want to work with those groups and create a subcommittee for all the chairs to bring all the information and all of the concerns that they have, or any campaigns or any funding issues that they might have, to each other to discuss them, to then bring them to me, and for me to then hold open forums with students that belong to those groups as well as the committees, and make sure that every student voice is being adequately heard, and make it less of a top-down system. So allow students to bring me any concerns they have within those open forums, then allow the subcommittee, which will be created from all of the groups, to allow for the intersectionality that's already at play at university, to help create a network of support throughout the lower level of university.
So that's all for the liberation officers, and those are all the questions. I hope you have enjoyed listening to what they had to say, but that's all for now. Thank you.
So that was the debate for the role of Liberation Officer. Next up this evening is the debate for the role of Activities and Development Officer. So the main purposes and responsibilities for the Activities and Development Officer is to represent and promote the views and interests of students on a range of student-led activities. So this includes ensuring an agreed annual budget is agreed in consultation with the Society's committee and monitoring the expenditure against agreed budgets. And it also includes supporting and coordinating the arrangements for student activities in all accommodation provided by the university, both directly as well as through other organisations.
They also have to lead SU finances and social enterprise activities and performance, What does this mean? Well, it means they have to development of new ideas, students' views and interests have to be represented, and ensure the committees, offices and unions are within the financial regulations.
The Activities and Development Officer is also responsible for developing and supporting programmes on skills development and employability. So this includes overseeing the allocation of resources, activities and services which support student skills development, and it also includes representing and promoting the views and interests of students on employability and skills development to the university.
They also are expected to be a member and be responsible for support of Forge societies and the theatre companies, as well as the film unit and activities forum. So that is it from Matt and myself. We hope you have enjoyed our coverage. We'll be passing on to Aaron now for the rest of the evening, where there will be obviously the activities and development debate, as well as the big one, the President's debate. So do not tune out, as Forge TV has got you covered for the rest of the evening.
Hello, my name is Dominic and I'll be hosting the second part of the second night's debates. So first up we have Activities and Development Officer, then followed by the presidential debates. So just to start off with, Activities and Development, can we have a nice warm welcome for our candidates? Is that? Ah, wonderful. Very enthusiastic. That's what we like. So we're just going to start off by having the candidates introduce themselves. So I'm going to pass to my right, and if people can kindly pass around to avoid this back and forth constantly. So there you go.
I'm Johanna Stroud.
I'm Lucy Comber.
I'm Alice Jackson.
Hi, my name is Ash Taylor.
My name's Stella.
Hi, my name is Rose Frankie.
Hello, my name's Joe Blackwell Quanchai.
Thank you very much, and terrific passing, great teamwork at play already. So moving on to our first question of the night, which is going to be for all candidates. Many of your manifestos aim to improve communication and collaboration between societies and the Students' Union. What do you think the main concerns of societies are, and how will you make sure their concerns are addressed? I'm going to start by passing over to yourself.
So obviously communication between societies and the SU is one of the major things in this role, and it's something that probably hasn't been done as well as it could have in the past. Now, I think every society is going to have its own kind of challenges and issues that they face, and so I don't think a one-size-fits-all approach is really going to work in this context, which I think is where people have fallen down in the past. I would aim to have office hours where I would, so my door would be open to anyone, whether they're in a society or whether they just have some ideas that they want to sort of pitch to me, because I really want to kind of make sure that every student feels that they can approach me and know that as Activities and Development Officer that I would do everything in my power to kind of help them out with any problems they have, and yeah.
So I think because obviously, 100 societies within the union, that obviously they all will face their own specific issues. So I think one of the issues particularly is that an awful lot of the information that's out there can be very difficult to firstly find, and then sometimes is actually pretty outdated. So I know personally when I've been looking for information as the operations officer for NODSOC on the SU website, sometimes the actual information is outdated, and sometimes it's just straight up not there, and it can be very difficult to find it. So if elected, I'd like to update all the information on the website and also just general signposts of resources of where the information actually is to make sure that everybody can actually find that.
My campaign's very much orientated around my own personal experiences, so I find that there's a big barrier between students and societies to start off with. So everyone's worried about joining a society too late, not knowing anyone, things like that. I think it's important to break down that barrier by doing non-member tickets to make communication between students and societies and break down that scary wall. And then between the SU and societies, I think it's really important that we create a digital space that we can all communicate on and support each other. The SU staff are amazing at helping societies to run each other, but it'd be good if we could reach out to one another, and then that could be a network between that and the SU officer as well, so they can constantly feed back to the SU officer on what they want to see in their society and the SU.
Hi, so my belief of what the main concerns of societies are is that fundamentally the university sell the university on the basis of student experience, and societies provide almost everything towards that. Societies provide everything that students do, and the university just simply don't provide enough money towards that. There is a cost of living crisis, meaning that students are paying massive amounts in energy bills, are paying enormous amounts for rent, and they simply don't have the money to go to everything they'd like to. So as Activities and Development Officer, I will take the fight to the university to provide more funding for student-led activity. Staff support could also be more clear towards societies. I think the staff structure at the SU is wonderful and it's a great resource that we have, but that sometimes it can feel a bit opaque as to how it all works. So I would like to make sure that it is more obvious for all societies how they can do it. I would also like to take away some of the bureaucracy involved. I would like to make it easier for societies to book rooms on a fair basis. I would like it easier for students to set up societies. And I would like to make it easier for students to find out about other students who aren't necessarily in a society already, to connect on what interests them.
So being on a committee myself for like a society, I kind of have noticed like two kind of concerns that we've had. One of them has been like advertising. I feel like there could be more opportunities for societies to advertise their events. For example, I'm part of the philosophy committee, and the other week we did like an event for LGBTQ History Month, and I remember thinking at the time, like, there's a lot of people like throughout the uni who would like this event and who would want to like take part in it, but there could be more of like a platform to advertise kind of these sorts of events and stuff. And then the second thing that I kind of noticed was I've had a lot of people on our committee saying about like training, like there could be more support for people like who are just joining committees. So like at the minute it's all SU staff who like run the training sessions. I feel like there could be like volunteers from previous committees who like run workshops and stuff. So I feel like support like that could be helpful.
So as society leaders, I think it's quite obvious that we need better and more effective communication, not only between society leaders, but also between like societies and students and SU staff. We use emails and Google Chat quite a lot, but I know that as students, getting bombarded with emails can be quite overwhelming, especially when you get so many emails from like the university, like if you're on mailing lists for volunteering and all that jazz. So as Activities and Development Officer, I would like to implement easy to use and effective methods to make the lives of society leaders a bit easier, and also enhance interconnectivity and collaboration between societies. One of the key points of my manifesto is making an active effort to listen to student voices, hosting in-person like drop-in sessions for support and guidance, and also to give students the opportunity to provide feedback on the activities and how they're run. I think this feedback is really essential in improving and developing the SU services that we provide for students, and creating a system that works for the students of Sheffield.
So I spent the last year on Societies Committee as well as being the Societies Councillor, which is representing the will of societies at SU Council. And one of those things I've realised is, as Societies Councillor, I've had a hard time communicating directly with societies. There's a lot of stratified bureaucracy that I have to go to. I can't directly email societies I can't find their email addresses. It's quite awkward for that. And so that means I can't best represent you when I'm doing that and having to fight against that. But some of the issues we've had through this year has been, first off, was the spiking and staying safe on nights out. And I think a lot of this has just we've come from the other side of a pandemic, we've lost a lot of experience, and the guidance offered by staff at the SU needs to be better aimed at people who are relatively inexperienced, because a lot of students don't have that experience of what do you do, somebody's been spiked on a night out, how do you deal with it? stuff like that, and we should have provided guidance like that. And also, in addition to that, it's just hard to find information on the SU website. I was trying to find a map to get here to show everybody where the debates were happening. I had to take a photo of a map on the wall and edit it slightly so that you could actually find your way here, which is just another example of how the SU has failed on communications and needs improvement in the digital domain.
Thank you very much to all of the candidates for your sort of well thought out responses to that question. So moving on from the society side of the activity side of the role to the development side of the role, this role obviously requires you to be responsible for budgeting in the Students' Union. So one of the big questions is what experience do you have in this capacity and how do you think that will help you within the role? So I'm going to go from left to right this time, shake it up a little bit. So Joe?
Okay, thank you, Dom. So I spent my best part of my second year as the deputy head of tech for Forge and also Forge Radio, as well as the kit secretary for American football team. And I was basically in charge of purchasing, which is a lot of working to a budget, and I've been looking at budgets. And with American football, we had the fun start to the year of, we started the year at minus £3,000 of debt, which is not a fun position to be in. And I've basically had to work on a budget, trying to buy new equipment, but also making merchandise plans to basically get us out of that situation, working with the treasurer of American football at the time. But I've got quite a lot of familiarity with budgets. I've also been the chair of a working committee for the last 2 years, and then part of that has just been overseeing the budget and what my treasurer has been doing, just to keep an eye on that, so I know where we stand financially. And yeah, that's pretty much most of my experience when it comes to budgets.
So last year I was the treasurer of the Music Play Society, which is quite a large musical society within the Students' Union. We have over 100 members. I held this role during COVID, so sadly we couldn't have a lot of our income comes from like playing at society balls, doing gigs, equipment rentals. But despite not being able to have this during COVID, I was still in charge of discussing with the committee about our membership costs, for example, about how much we charge for gigs and equipment rentals, and as well as this role that I held last year throughout my time on both the Music Play Society and the Flute Choir Society committees. I've been in charge of or helping to plan concerts and events and working with the treasurers of both of those societies in terms of our budget and budget management and planning of the events. So if I was elected Activities and Development Officer, I would try my best to apply this existing knowledge that I have to the role.
Thank you. So I've been part of the Philosophy Society for 2 years now. I've been social sec and president. So as social sec, I had to do quite a lot of budgeting. None of the events actually went ahead because of COVID, but we still had to make a budget for things like our Christmas ball and our trip abroad. So I'd say I have quite a lot of budgeting experience in that aspect. And as president, obviously, I've had to oversee all the other committee members, and I've helped out our finance officers with things like filling in finance forms and funding and stuff. So I'd say I have quite a good understanding of how finance works in the SU and budgeting for societies and stuff.
So I think firstly I'd say that as chair and then selections officer at Film Unit, when we essentially didn't have a committee and didn't have a treasurer coming out of coronavirus into the new academic year, I've essentially helped manage and create the budget for many thousands of pounds of SU money, which I helped set up with our current Activities and Development Officer back in September. So I've clearly got understanding and knowledge of how SU money, SU budgets already work. I've been to many SU council meetings and heard budgets presented to me, and I've also been a society treasurer. So I like to think that in technical SU experience, I've got it covered. But I think even more importantly than that is the fact that as development officer, I will, as Activities and Development Officer, sorry, I forgot that the roles have been combined. As Activities and Development Officer, I will be in having some degree of input into the budget, and we have a role in improving the SU as an employer. Now, I have fought for pay rises for SU staff before. I helped with Unite's Better Than Zero campaign 2 years ago. I've stood on picket lines for IWGB and UCU. I have experience fighting for pay rises, and I've experience fighting for better conditions, all of which is involved in managing a budget, or at least feeds into it. So I would like to take that experience, fighting for better rights, and use it to make a good budget that actually makes life work.
I'm the first member of my family to go to university, so I had no idea of what I was doing with like personal finances or budgeting. So for me, that was like a huge achievement, budgeting my weekly shop, clothing, nights out, social events. So for me, that was like a huge achievement to do on my own with minimal support from home. But from a society's perspective, I have been a social secretary. I've organised some amazing events on campus. Oreo and Friends was something that we did in the Rainer Lounge, and we had to work out how much a ticket needed to be to break even and things like that. And that was great to getting people involved. So we had like armadillos running about and raccoons. So one day, I don't know, they might be back. But I'm also the president of the Pet Society this year. I work really closely with the treasurer, and although I don't have experience as a treasurer directly or as a kit sec or anything like that, I'm a really determined person, and if I can't do it, I'll find out how. So I feel the skills that I've gained from being independent and on a society, I'll reach out to people so I can be the best finance person I can.
So as a working class student, I have a very extensive experience here in managing finances and money, and stretching money to make it go much further. So that's something I have a pretty extensive experience there. However, also as operations officer for a pretty large society, we regularly meet. So throughout this year, we work pretty closely with each other. We regularly meet each week. So have regularly work with our finance and development officer, looking at all of the grants that are available to us and passing on the information and discussing as a society what avenues we can go down for get more funding for us, and what opportunities we can therefore look at with this money and what we will then do with it. So we've looked at that every single grant we can, looking through that and looking what they will do with that to expand our society and therefore make it better. We have, for example, our labor expand, which makes it much more inclusive for people who come from less background, some money, and also just helps to expand the society and knowledge of different things.
So I'm going to be honest, I don't have the experience of running a multi-million-pound organisation, but I don't think any of us sitting here do. What I do have is 3 years in a senior position on the A Cappella Society, and at the start of the year, our finance officer unfortunately had to step down, so that's been up to me and the rest of the committee to kind of take on a lot of those responsibilities, kind of dealing with finance forms and that sort of thing. Those 3 years on committee have given me a really good understanding of kind of what financial options are available to societies, what kind of help people like the alumni can be, and sort of a general idea of how the kind of budgeting of the SU is sort of run. I think one of the things that will really help me as activities and development officer is to make sure that the SU has a really strong financial foundation, and a lot of my policies are geared towards kind of finding new revenue streams, such as I want to set up a society's SU festival, and a varsity for gamers. All of these things can help to kind of engage the wider community and make sure that they're able to also kind of participate in the SU, to get more alumni involved, and also I want to pressure the university to spend some of the money that they've saved during the strike action into the SU.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to hear such a wide range of experiences amongst the candidates, and I'm sure that will serve the electorate well. Unfortunately, we only have time for one more question in tonight's debate, but arguably on the most important topic of all, which is how would you make sure that students' views and interests are represented in developing services at the Students' Union? Left or right? Which way do we think? I pass over to you, Joe.
Okay then, thanks again, Dom. When it comes to making sure student interests are represented, there are myriad ways of doing it. So often the process the SU uses, and has used a few times before, is that we essentially start by doing out a general survey, just to gauge the general opinion of things, and then we work to create working groups of representative representatives that represent the student voice. And so with those groups, we then work more closely. We'll have regular meetings with them to develop a plan and strategy to going forwards. So if, say, we're redoing how Bar 1 works, we'd put a survey out going, what do you like about Bar 1, what do you not like, stuff like that, and we'll collect all that data, and then we'll go and ask some of the respondents to maybe come back and ask if they're interested in participating in such a group. So this last year myself, I've been involved in what has been called the Student Recognition Hearing Scheme Working Group, which is basically coming up with a replacement for HEAR. And that process is basically just ensuring that we, as students, our voices are heard. It covers a wide range of students from a wide range of areas. I come mainly from societies background, but I know there are students there who are purely academic, really in nature, and are there to represent academic interests. And we also have sports interests, so Sport Sheffield are involved there. So it's basically ensuring we have a wide range of voices in these working groups going forwards. And yeah, that's it, I should say.
Thank you. So obviously a key part of this role is listening to students, their views, their interests, and applying this to SU services and how the SU runs. As Activities and Development Officer, as I've mentioned earlier in the first question, I would like to run informal drop-in sessions, both in person and online, to accommodate for all kinds of time schedules, and also providing like a Google form for anonymous online feedback. The last 2 years I've been on the student staff committee for the music department, representing postgraduate students, and I found that the best way to kind of communicate with my peers is to just have informal conversations about the issues that they might be experiencing as students, and then obviously going to the meetings and feeding it back to higher members of staff, and then seeing changes in the way that the department is run. So I think a greater level of knowledge of the issues that students are experiencing in the SU will help to break down the barriers between students and staff, and all in all just promote more incorporation of like students' views and interests in SU services.
I think a really effective way of like hearing back from students and just hearing their experiences is really making the most out of social media. So regular Q&As and like regular surveys, just to get a general idea of how students are feeling, because I feel like a lot of the time students don't really know where to go to like express their opinions and like their worries. So I feel like really signposting it on social media and having like a specific platform through which they can get in contact and like express their thoughts is like the most effective way that we can hear back from students. So yeah.
Thank you. So I think to kind of finish off, to represent the views and interests of students at the Students' Union should feel to all students who are part of it like it belongs to them. Students should feel unhindered in the activities they want to run. Students should feel able to do things, whether they're part of a society or not. I think that's something that we have to consider a lot, is that it's quite easy to organise activities through a society, but it should be easier to set up a society, and it should be easier to find other students who have the same interests as you. we need an SU that feels like it belongs to us as students, and we are definitely some of the way there now, but it could be a lot more through just admin processes being easier, through it being easier to just kind of having it more spaces to kind of put up posters, display what you want to do, just less hindrance of student activity. And the other way that the students' interests are represented is by recognising the number of student workers we have here. Employability is a large part of activities and development, and one of the most important parts of employability is if you have a job, you should be able to organise for better rights and conditions. I will help students work out the ways that they can take on their employers to fight for better rights and conditions together, unionise, get students organising together, better pay, better jobs, better contracts, including in the SU. Thank you.
Thank you. I think student feedback is crucial to making the SU a better place, but it's really intimidating, like you said, to go and admit that you're not happy with something or to reach out to people. Not everyone has the confidence to do that. So I think online is a great way to do that as well. Social media polls on Instagram are amazing. Like the feedback that people get from that is great. But if I created a digital space for us to communicate as committees and society members, this could be a way to anonymise feedback as well. And then that could be fed back into the students' union officer roles as well. This feedback can then be used to orientate events to facilitate student needs. Instead of throwing money at events to make them bigger and better, we don't necessarily all want that. We're trying to transition back to normal life, so running a mixture of smaller, bigger events, online, in person, sober, non-sober, you name it. I think we should listen to what the students have to say rather than assuming what people need. And I think online and digital platforms could be the best way to do that.
So yeah, I'd like to have open office hours to invite people to come around and actually share their ideas. I'd also actively work with the representative committees, the liberation officer, and also the part-time officers to make sure that all those groups are actually being represented. I'd also then like to actively actually attend society events to not only see things then or be approached by people and there are concerns at the moment, but also just to generally make sure I can present myself as somebody who's actively approachable and invested within society and just general students' union stuff. I'd also like to have, at certain points, send out requests for feedback, but also just permanently have a suggestion box, another suggestion box online that people can just use at any point. In the society I'm in, we have done that throughout the year, and we've got some really good feedback from people learning what they want through both at certain times requesting for the feedback, like towards the end of the year or start of the year, how things have gone, but also just permanently having an anonymous suggestion box.
So I think one of the crazy things about campaigning over the last couple of days has been realizing how many people you speak to who don't actually know who the SU officers are. And kind of realizing that has made me sort of think about how we sort of present ourselves as SU officers. And so one of the main things that I would aim to do is, I'll refer you back to my earlier answer when I mentioned these open office hours, to kind of to make sure that I'm approachable to any student and they feel they're able to kind of come to me with any suggestions or ideas. I think one of the really big problems we have in the SU is actually getting people involved in the SU. The things that we do here are great, but actually I think the best way to get students involved and get them excited about what's happening in the SU is just to get them involved, get to know them on a personal level. And for me personally, I feel like one of the best ways to do that is just to have these conversations with people. For me, that role doesn't begin in June when we get into office. That begins as soon as elections happen, and I'd be looking to get to know as many students as possible personally, so that they feel that they can come to me whenever.
Thank you very much. As you can see, we've got a brilliant range of candidates, more than enough choice for all of the voters out there in the audience today, I'm sure. But that, I'm afraid, sadly concludes our debates for the Activities and Development Officer role. These have been your candidates. They're wonderful, of course. And back to the studio. Thank you very much.
I'm Aaron Griffin, and now on to the debate for the role of SU President. As your president, one of these 5 candidates will represent our views and interests as students, will communicate with the SU to implement their plan, and hopefully deliver on their manifesto promises. If you would like any more detailed information on the role, head on over to the SU website. Now I'll hand on over to Dominic for the debate.
Thank you very much. So I assume, yes, everyone can still hear me. I can hear it echoing in the background. But here we are, final debate of the officer election season. So this is the SU President's debate. I'm joined here by several wonderful candidates who will introduce themselves shortly. And in fact, they will introduce themselves now. We'll hand over to my right, first of all.
Okay. I'm Baz. Vote Baz for ball pits.
I'm Liam. I'm an archaeology student. Make a stand, vote for hand.
Hello, I'm Chris, physics and philosophy, and vote Chris, yeah.
Hi, I'm Fob, and I'm a philosophy student and the current LGBT part-time officer.
Hi, I'm Alexandra, and my name doesn't rhyme with anything, so I don't have a cool little slogan, but yeah, just vote Alexandra, that'd be cool. Thank you.
So a range of candidates with a range of outfits, but moving on from fashion, for what reason do you think you are best suited for the role of SU President? And I'll start by going to my right, and then we'll move back across.
It's very simple. It's time for truly sensible leadership at the Student Union in Sheffield. If you vote for me, you are voting to transform the octagon into a nonagon. You are also voting to recognise VK bottle throwing as what it truly should be, a sport. And finally, you are voting for Rory to become Vice-Chancellor of this university. I urge you, therefore, to vote for Baz for ball pits. Do the right thing.
How to follow that up? That's really can I have a moment, actually? Oh, dear. Okay.
Okay, and Liam?
Thank you. I think you should vote for me because as an SU president, I think I've got the CV for it. I'm the vice chair of council. I've had a range of experiences at my 5 years here. I've been in the foundation year. I'm from a department that's had a lot of adversity as the archaeology department, and been really involved in the campaign and lobbying for that, and trying to actually make positive change in the university. And I'm on societies committee as well, and I've sort of seen how we can make sort of societies and the sort of the students' union better for all students, really. So.
Chris?
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, it's a nice question. I think it gets asked every year, and every year we get quite similar responses, which is fair, because I think everyone here, even the chicken, cares about the student experience and our students on campus. And we've all done things in our time here to represent that. So what makes me different would be the awareness that a year isn't that long of a time to implement real, effective, systemic change here. So instead, I can look at what SU presidents and nominees of the past have done, how I can implement that, work with them, see what worked and what didn't, and create a future for the next SU president to have a platform to work with. And also aware of like the people on campus such as XR, UCU, who don't work per year or per terms. They're here consistently, and how can I create a platform where their voice can be heard? And secondly, my aims and my intentions are measurable. You'll know if I kept to my promise. With the SU Summer Festival, it will happen, and you'll see that this guy did what he promised to do. And with my TED Talks, you'll see this guy set out to do that and he did it, so you'll be able to measure my worth as a president. Thank you.
Well, I think I'm best suited to be president because in terms of student representation, I've got the groups behind me to back me up. You know, I'm a LGBT student, I'm a trans student, I'm a disabled student, I've been through the whole leave of absence thing, all of that. And I've got experience of the SU. I'm in the current officer team, obviously, and I've been on LGBT committee for a couple of years now. obviously I sit on council through being an officer as well, and I am just not done with the SU. There is so much more that I could do as president as opposed to in my part-time role, and I'm looking to carry on here, basically.
Yeah, so like I know I'm like best suited for SU president because I like to organise a fight, and that's not just because I'm from Barnsley. There's like a lot that we need to fight for, and we need a fighting students' union for that. You know, we still see students paying a lot of money for substandard housing. Spiking is still rife within our club and our venues. You know, like student workers are getting sexually assaulted at work, and they far too often are messed about in terms of their wages and their hours. And I guess like my CV for that is, you know, like I'm on the committee for a society across both campuses here in Sheffield called Sheffield Solidarity Group. We're an activist group, and you know we've organised a lot of stuff. We've helped organise rent strikes. I've organised anti-spiking demonstrations. I've been on the front line of currently the biggest gig economy in the history of the UK. They've just gone past their 69th day, and that's the Just Eat couriers. And you know, like as a student, I've been organising picket line visits, and we've been out like every day with them. You know, so like it's just important that we have all that, and I can definitely deliver.
Thank you very much for your wide variety of answers in approach to this question. So moving on from this, what I would like now is if you could tell us one achievement a previous SU president has done that you admire and why. So I'm going to start with my left this time.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll go for this guy, Ali Youssef, who I only heard about recently. But way back in the 1930s, he was the first international president here in Sheffield. And he managed to secure free health checks for every student on campus. And this was before the NHS even existed. And what I like about this so much is that it shows that a small society such as our SU doesn't just follow the bigger society, like the government. We can actually precede them, and we can implement fantastic changes that the wider society looks at us and goes, wow, that's a really good idea. What they're doing in Sheffield at that SU is fantastic. We're going to follow them. We can do it here again. We can do it with things like rent strikes, teacher strikes, mental health, more funding in the mental health. Ali Youssef did it with physical health, but we can bring it in with mental health, really start getting some serious funding in, and perhaps the wider government will look at what Sheffield is doing and be like, yes, what they're doing is good. Those students are using their voices with these exciting ideas, and we want to follow that. So yeah, and Ali Youssef, quite an inspiration.
So in terms of previous achievements of a president, not to keep banging on about being an officer, but having worked with Evie, I've seen a lot of what she's done this year, and I really, really respect her work as president this year. And I think a massively underappreciated part of the president role is the sheer amount of firefighting that you have to do on the job, and it's been a really difficult year for that, obviously, with changes around the pandemic and the spiking things that have been going on through the year and the strikes at the moment. And I have really respected a lot of the work that Evie has put into all of that, which, you know, it does mean sidelining some of your goals for the time being and just responding to crises, which, yeah, I think it is a very underappreciated thing that the president has to do, and I think that she's handled most of it very well.
So curveball, I didn't choose an SU president, not because I don't appreciate anything that they've done or I don't admire anything that they've done. You know, I think Evie's great, you know, like Fob has said. But one of the people at the SU that I would like to say who I admire was the Coffee Revolution workers who in 2019 and 2020, they organised their own campaign over unfair pay. You know, they joined Unite and they threatened to go on strike over that. And I think that's a really admirable action because it just shows what student workers can and do achieve. They achieved better pay. Eventually they won a reduced use of 0-hour contracts, and they won 2 months of furlough, which, you know, for previously ununionized workers is a massive achievement. And for me, because student activism and workers' rights are my bag, that's really really admirable. So
Thank you. And over to Baz.
I don't know a huge amount about the SU, so I can't name a president. However, I think that there are a few important things that need to take place in the Students' Union The first is somebody who listens truly to the students of Sheffield and what they want. That is why today I've announced 2 new policies. The first of which, to transform the uni campus into a Mario Kart track on one day every year. The second of these was to transform the Broad Lane block into a hall of mirrors. It is this sort of revolutionary change that this students' union truly needs now. It's interesting that Fob was speaking earlier about the SU president firefighting. I say we should install sprinklers in the SU president's office to try and fight those fires. Thank you very much.
So, on a more serious note, I suppose I would second Fob in sort of singing Evie's praises, but more specifically what's been happening today. What they've really proven today is that, like, as a students' union, we can be more involved in striking, we can be supportive as a student and staff together, and that it's not just our university and our union on its own. There were people from Leeds. The president role is a role that is not just internal, it is external. National movements can be pushed for within the role, and I think sort of understanding the long-lasting sort of impact you can have on setting the precedents for things like that is really important. You can be limited to a year, but you can, within long-term plans, have things you can actually do in a year that lay the groundwork for bigger things to come afterwards. So I think that's probably what I would say.
Thank you to all the candidates for your responses there, and I think it goes to show that legacy does stick about, and it'll be interesting to see what the legacy of this debate turns out to be in 2130. Is that about right? So moving on from these group questions in which all of the candidates answer the same question, we'll now be moving on to individual questions. So these are questions that are focused largely on the manifestos that the candidates themselves have written, and it gives us time to delve into that a bit more and try and explore those a little bit. So starting off with Alexandra, you want to bring back general meetings where any student can vote, speak and bring motions. Please could you tell us more about this? Oh, sorry. How will this work alongside the elected Students' Union Council?
Yeah, so like I fully believe that the Students' Union should be 100% for students, by students, and I think that the students of Sheffield and students of every university deserve a transparent Students' Union. I think that for too long the bureaucracy of the Students' Union has hindered the students' movement. So my manifesto includes to bring back general meetings where, like Dom said, anyone can come, anyone can vote, and anyone can raise motions themselves, because I believe that it's all well and good having the SU Council to make decisions, but you know, like these are people who've had themselves elected into that position, and therefore it's not 100% representative. So what I propose instead is to have the SU Council meetings as we do regularly, and then maybe at the end of every term have a general meeting, which is what used to happen back when general meetings were more popular. You know, they're not like a new idea. And if that general meeting's decision was quora, as in like that was, or like they said something that maybe they didn't agree with the SU or what the SU Council put forward, if they had the higher percentage decision, then that was what go ahead, because that is 100% more representative and for every student, rather than just a student council of like maybe 10 people or whatever. So yeah, I don't think the question should be worded the way that it was. I think it should be more like how will it work alongside and with, in addition to, or you know, like etc.
But thank you for that clarification. No, you're more than welcome. So moving over to Chris now. You're proposing a landlord/house review app. Can you explain more in depth about what this app entails and how you plan to implement it?
Yeah, so this goes back to this idea of working with past SU presidents and nominees. This is something that's been talked about for a few years but hasn't properly been implemented, or if it hasn't been pushed well enough because no one's using it. I actually first heard about it from the great Dom Fairbrass way back 3 years ago when he was running. But I'm going to succeed now. You're welcome. But I can work with people like Dom who ran for it and failed. But work with them to see how we can succeed on what is a great idea. As an app, it's a relatively simple concept you say you're living at 94 Crooksmore Road, which I'm sure is lovely, but if it was filled with mold, people could put that in, or they could say things like, the oven takes half an hour to warm up, the landlord charged us for things that weren't too expensive, there were unexpected gas prices. You could put that into that accommodation, and then if someone was looking for a rent and they were looking at 95 Crooksmore Road, they could type that into the app and see what the lived experience was like without a landlord bias, and understand it, and it would really affect landlords to actually get off their asses and do some work to make housing livable. And it would go great in conjunction with a renters union to really push that, but also affect the landlords in the system we currently live in, because change can be difficult and time consuming. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I always thought it would be a harder experience sat in the candidate seat, but apparently not. I think I've faced more criticism sat here. But moving on to thank you. Moving on to Liam now. You propose expanding the role of the Students' Union to incorporate a Renters' Union. What will this proposed union do, and how would you go about establishing it?
So, I'm really glad this was the question I got asked, because I have been dying to speak about it. So I propose so currently we have a student advice centre, and it is an advisory body, but a lot of people don't realise sort of what their rights are as tenants. I would like us to sort of raise awareness for what those rights are. For example, so many people don't know that if a landlord tries to raise your rent, you have they have to give you 3 months' notice, and you can dispute that, and independent bodies need to come in to evaluate the property and see whether that is reflective. Little easy bits of information like that, which they could currently do, but raise awareness of those things. Also, it would allow us to organise for against sort of unscrupulous landlords. We can not only just sort of recommend good landlords, but also like hold them accountable. We can organise, we can do open letters, we can boycott and even picket if necessary. Like as a union, we are like it's within our remit to do that. Also, it'd be good to use as a means for providing information on accessible housing for students, and giving additional support to international students for short-term lettings over longer over summers and things like that, to provide, so just provide sort of better quality housing and awareness for students really, and improve the quality of living in general. So, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So, Oliver, Baz, a lot of your policies have been described as a bit more unorthodox than the other candidates. For example, suggesting to remodel Uni Central into a permanent ball pit. Why should voters take you seriously, or, well should they?
I take this very seriously, so I'm going to stand up. Students of Sheffield, the world is in crisis. We have scandals every day, Partygate, the largest pandemic the world has seen since the Spanish flu, the ever worsening environmental crisis. So in times of crisis, we need strong leadership. We need a campaign that unites people. We need a campaign for revolutionary change. I am that candidate for Sheffield Student Union. The question of seriousness really melts away upon reading my manifesto. No other candidate sitting behind me, has the vision to stand for what truly matters in this great city, at this university. No other candidate wants to make the octagon a nonagon. These are the policies that people need. No other candidate has stood for a conduit slip and slide, or as Rory for Vice-Chancellor. I urge you, therefore, to vote for Baz for ball pits. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. It'll be interesting to see what Cohen Lamberts thinks of the Vice-Chancellor suggestion. So last but not least, Fob, you propose increasing student support accessibility in areas such as mental health. What have previous officers who have made similar commitments failed to do, and what will you do to ensure that it works?
Well, first of all, I just want to note that there have been good strides made in mental health and accessibility. It's not all been failures. And second of all, it's really hard to point to specific failures in terms of mental health and accessibility, because people do tend to keep their manifestos deliberately vague. And obviously, I am guilty of that. My poster says access to mental health, and that is what people do. So I'm not going to go and call out past officers for things that they should have done, because I think it's not the space for it, and it's also just too difficult to do. But what I do want to do is set out specifics for myself and not keep myself as vague as I think some people have been and tend to be. And basically that includes a complete overhaul of counselling systems. So putting real money into counselling, getting counselling staff on, getting funding help for private counselling and liaising with external services like BetterHelp to get interim help, and making systems just easier to get into, like not all of the web pages and stuff that you have to go through. Also academically, like remote learning options and flexible examination options, and other measures to do with mental health, like inclusivity work feeds into mental health, and issues with out of time.
Thank you very much. So unfortunately that brings us to the end of the 2022 election debate saga, perhaps that's the best word. And so if we could have a nice, healthy, generous round of applause, obviously for our president candidates, but also for all of the candidates we've had this evening. Thank you and good night.
The ballots will open on Monday the 7th at 10 a.m. and close on Wednesday the 9th at 5 p.m. We'll see you next week for the live results night. Thank you so much for watching this year's coverage of the SU election debates, and from all of us at Forge TV, good night.